we need to fill this spot up right here.
So let's do it. So what I want to do with this build is have just the facade of a building with the entrance and the Welcome to Mordheim sign just above it. And behind it will be the crater itself. So once I found the piece of cardboard that I wanted to use for the walls, I needed to find something for the floor. I have a stack of particle board rectangles that I bought a while back that I've used for basing a lot of my builds. And so I wanted to see if I could do something with that again. The problem was they're kind of the wrong size for what I'm looking for. Either they were too small or too long, and I just wasn't really excited with how much cutting or how much adding I would have to do to the base if I were to use it. So I went elsewhere looking for material. In the past, I have used foam board for the walls of my buildings, but I have a lot of cardboard, and I thought that, hey, why don't I just use this? Maybe it'll help me just get projects done instead of worrying about having the right material or the best material. I know that I can get hung up on making decisions, so maybe this will help me make a bunch of different buildings a lot faster if I'm not worrying about that stuff. I had started this project while I was working on the crater board so that I would know how much space I had to work with, and so that when I finished the board, it had area for this building to slot into. After a bit of shaping, I had a base that I liked that allowed it to stand, but also didn't obstruct too much of the ground. This is going to be a tall building, and you can see in the inside there's a grid pattern that I use to help lay out the floors on the inside and the gateway that would be the entrance to the building. I didn't really have an idea on what I wanted to do with the doorway yet, so first I just cut out a nice big double door entrance. The rest I'd figure it out later. For the exterior of the building, I wanted a mix of stonework and wood. Most of Mordheim's buildings are Tudor-esque in design, so there's a lot of exposed wood beams, and I like that style, and I wanted to incorporate it into this building as well. But I wanted to have like some solid foundation to it, alluding to the reason why it's the only thing left of the building. A lot of my creative process with this one is pretty much just winging it. So I didn't know what I was going to do with these columns at first, if I was going to detail them in any particular way. I just wanted to put them down on the building so that I could see them and make the decision afterwards. decided to add a crossbeam above the door to just close it off and give it a more secure look to it. On the crater board, I built a outline for the front of the building so that when I wanted to slot this in to the board, I can just like clip it there. So that was made with brickwork, and so I wanted to mirror that brickwork into the base of the building. So the border around the two walls will also have those big bricks. I cut out the blocks so that I could individually glue them onto the base of the structure. More for aesthetics than for anything else. I know that sometimes just carving the bricks into a single sheet of foam actually is less structurally sound than cutting them all up and then gluing them all together, because the glue gives it more of a structure. But since I'm using this just for a facade, it wasn't necessary, but I liked being able to get a solid cracks in between each brick. Since I was putting only a row of bricks on both sides, this didn't take much time to get done. Used a ball of aluminum foil to give some texture to all the bricks on the outside, then went to work on the brickwork I wanted around the door frame. I decided that the whole front part there was going to be stonework. So to help me with this, I devised this little device that would be used to press brick patterns into the foam. I just used a piece of random metal I found lying around and hot glued it and super glued it to the base of my brush, and now I can just punch in these bricks to give it that pattern that I'm looking for. And there we go. Worked pretty well. Got two of them for both sides of the doors, and now what it looks like framed in there, I think it's looking pretty good, and the inside as well. Before I do anything else, it's time to put the framework in on the interior of the building. I'm thinking of some beams on the inside here, but then I also need to cut up this side so it's not as perfect and more jagged, so it looks like it's been torn down. I also want to put a "Welcome to Mordheim" sign right across here. So I tore up the walls, made them look a little bit more organic in their destruction, and now it's time to start working on putting down the floorboards inside the building. I built these structures here for each of the levels. Since this thing is kind of precarious, I'm gonna hot glue them in and put a little bit of support just to make sure they don't fall down. It was this time that I realized I ran out of coffee stir sticks. So I made this a while back for a different project, never used it. And for now, until the new stir sticks come in, I'm gonna use these. I've been using a lot more hot glue of late on my projects. I think I've been a little too impatient with the regular glue. So the first boards that I put down, I use the hot glue, and then I start using regular white glue to add in the rest, since it wasn't as important to set them properly. I decided to add a little bit more security to these floors by creating these, I don't know what you call them, um, anchoring points for between the floors and the beams that keep them up. I think it also adds just a little bit more realism to them. Just having these floors floating there didn't really look good to me. And it also gives me another anchoring point for floorboards when I'm attaching them, since a lot of this is I'm building off the cuff rather than structuring the entire building, drawing the floorboards of the entire building, and then destroying it afterwards. Since the sign is going to be obstructing most of that front area there, I still wanted some way for minis to look out from the building without there being windows. So I decided I was going to cut open this area right here and allow for that window. I don't have a lot of ranged opportunities in my warbands, but I think this would be a really good sniper spot. After that, I needed to clean the floors, cutting off the extra pieces that were in the way or didn't make sense that still existed, just to trim up these areas for accessibility and believability. I wanted the area on the bottom floor to be covered in shrapnel from the building and debris. So I took a bunch of the pieces that I had cut off and dumped them into some glue and collected them in the corners around here so that they didn't get in the way for minis to move around, but still added that feel I wanted. The exterior of the building needed a little love, so I decided to work on that next. I took some more stir sticks and started adding the paneling that you usually see in Mordheim buildings on the exterior here. I decided that these stone pillars were going to stay as is, so I added some texture to the outside of it to match the rest of the stone. Still wasn't satisfied with the edges of this building, so I added pieces of coffee stir sticks into it, embedded in it, to give it more destructed look. And after that, it was time to start adding the first layer of primer. So this is just Mod Podge and black paint, and I'm just going to cover over all of the foam, so I can then take this outside and spray it down. It's good enough for now. Time to take it outside. The walls were still a little too smooth for my taste, so I decided to take straight Mod Podge and splot it onto the interior walls to give it a texture that then, once I paint it over, would just add more and more to. once I was done with that, I decided to do the same on the outside. Once that was dry, it was time to start painting the entire thing. So I took a dark brown and just went over the almost everything with it. Mostly the walls, the wood on both the inside and outside of the structure. This would allow me to then have something to work on to either darken it or lighten it. I haven't decided yet if I prefer working from black to the light or light to the darks. I feel like each project ends up being a little different. I painted over the stonework with the maroon and teal that I usually do, just getting all of it covered once over. And then I started with a dry brush of just straight white, just to bleach it all out. I used gesso to paint the interior walls here. Once that was all dry, I took my wash and started covering the entire inside of the building with it. This wash started off with an actual recipe, but over the time, I've just started adding random colors into it and measurements of paint and stuff. So it's always just a little different than I expected to. I think this one's a little too gray than what I want, so I might be either restarting or just adding more black to it. But for this one, for this project, it seems to be working well enough for what I want. I do the same with the outside, washing the entire thing out. This really brings down the exterior almost to the point where it looks like the walls were like a black painted color. But I think it actually ended up working well. So when I said earlier that I waited until the white paint had dried, I guess I was wrong, because once I started patting down the wash to like bring out some of the highlights, it actually started pulling some of the paint away. For some of the areas, it actually looked pretty good. I liked it here on the exterior walls where that brown was pulled back and the black was left behind, but it also happens inside, which I'm not as excited about. You can see right here where the paint was pulled off with my gentle dabbing. But that's alright. I think it adds some character. With the whole thing washed down and dabbed up, I think this is about time to let it just dry and not touch it for a little bit. I'll set this aside for now and work on the next part of this project. For the Welcome to Mordheim sign, I decided to print out a modified version of the logo for the game and glue that to a piece of cardboard that is cut to the same shape. This would give it a little bit of thickness and also allow it to withstand painting over and anything I do to it without it warping too much. I thought it was going to be a cool idea if I were to cut out a second set of letters from the logo and then glue that on top to give it like an emboss feeling. However, cutting something this small and this intricate ended up being a little too tedious for me. And so I scrapped it. I used some of my army speed paints to dye the printer paper so that it looked more of like a painted sign that has been aged and worn away. I'm kind of surprised how well this worked. The paper didn't warp at all, and the paints did a really good job of giving it this weathered wood appearance without me doing anything extra. I think the only thing I did after this was cover the edges of the whole thing in glue just to give it like a solid surface so it didn't look like cardboard. But other than that, it was exactly what I wanted. So, lucky me. Now that it's all actually dry, I decided to give it a good dry brushing. Pop up those highlights, especially on the stonework. So I go over it with a white, with mixed in with a little bit of beige, just to give it some warmth, which this thing ends up not having at all afterward, but whatever. I also touch up all of the wood and edges of the floors to draw focus to them, give them some points of interest. At the last minute, I decided to add a little bit of extra details, some moss in the corner, and a rope that goes down from each floor to allow for minis to climb up it. Another way to get up and down from these floors.
All right, it's done. Let's see what it looks like. Perfect. Look at that. It's in just right. Now we got one board done. 3 more to go before the Mordheim event. So thank you for watching all the way through. And if you like this video, like and subscribe to the channel so I can keep on doing this. All right, see you next time. Bye. Hey, this is Andrew from the future. This video is coming up after the Mordheim event. So I'll be coming out with more videos soon. Let's just say that it all doesn't happen as I expected. So stay tuned.